What does the word centering mean to you? Um, and for some reason, Amy, I thought you were off of bells for like a couple of months. What does centering mean to me? Centering means getting aligned with your with the present moment. It can be with your truest self. Centering is connecting to that part of you that is, that part of you that allows you to kind of stand up straight with your shoulders squared. Um, that's what it means to me. If somebody says it's really centering for me, I would say that it's really grounding, it's authentic and aligned. Hello, Caitlin. So yeah, that's what it would mean to me. Um, did you have the ice maker? Did you have a different definition, or what is the point of the question? I'm just curious. Your mom did a program for Circle in relation to Epiphany about Star Wars. Your mom did a program for Circle in relation to Epiphany about Star Words. Yours is centering. Okay. I'm not sure I understand that. You just picked a random number and centering is mine for this year. Program for Circle in relation to it. Okay. Well, to be honest, I would think that that's cool. If somebody said that my word this year is centering, that would mean to me that I need to get on track with my most and aligned with my most authentic self. So are you saying that you picked that word? Circle. I see. Your women's group at church. Hi, Lily. How are you? um, and your word was centering. So, I mean, I think that could be very positive. I don't know what it means in that context necessarily, but I think that would be really positive. Lily, that's great. I'm glad you got started on that. Jen, have I worked on my book? Not nearly as much as I thought, and I don't know when the last time that you were in. But I did get feedback from the editor, and what I ultimately believe I've decided to do is to rewrite the book as a novel. There were just a ton of concerns about how I was going to present the information, but not leaving myself open to defamation of character problems. And, at the end of the day, I decided I did not want to do anything that was going to put me in a position of having to confront the characters in the book, namely my ex and my sister. And so I've got like 2 chapters into, it's a lot of the same stuff, but it's going to be a novel. And so I'm going to take some creative liberties. I'm going to pick kind of one big section and highlight that and then fill in with some historical background. And people are just going to have to sit back and wonder which parts are true and which parts are fiction. And what's good in a way is that I can, in the book, because it's fiction, I can react all of the ways that I wanted to. Like, I was trying to think, do I still want to be this, what kind of character do I really want to be? Do I want to be that, maybe I'll do a book that has like 2 endings. I don't know. It's because of that, it's going to take me some time to do a rewrite, but I haven't, it's not a project I've forgotten. Let's see. Jax, can you talk about anxiety and or gut intuition? Is that what you're asking? How to tell the difference? So I think gut intuition can produce anxiety. Sometimes people confuse anxiety with butterflies and excitement. Keep in mind that anxiety is fear, right? And every single time, and you may not know what you're afraid of or what the fear is rooted in, but anxiety is a physiological reaction to something that your brain is perceiving that it needs to be afraid of. So it's driving the heart rate, the shallow breathing, the muscle tightness, the perspiration, whatever it is. And that can come from a gut instinct. It can come from facts. It can come from like just a forward thinking kind of an assumption about the future. So I'm not sure that directly answers your question. But if I also talk a little bit about gut instinct, gut instincts, I think you're referring to those, and I would say that they're feelings that happen. And sometimes, and that's why sometimes that feeling is based on fear, so it can be anxiety, but it can also not represent truth at all. And so I would tell you that if you have a gut instinct, look for evidence. Find facts that support your instinct. Sometimes we can get, we have enough emotional trauma that our instincts are skewed based on the traumatic events of our past and not necessarily on current situations. And so that gut instinct can just be a fear, or that, so I guess in that sense, a fear, anxiety of something that has happened. Maybe that's part of what you're asking me. So now that I just talked around in a great big circle, hopefully that answers your question. Hang on. But what if we fear things that aren't real? Is that foreboding? I'd have to stop and really put some thought into foreboding and what the exact definition of that is. Being afraid of things that aren't real is irrational. So that's probably more of a cognitive distortion. If foreboding, if you're using that as kind of a worry about things to come, like it hasn't happened yet, it's not real, I'm just afraid that someday it will happen, I would say that that's a waste of energy. We all do it a little bit, right? But every time I catch myself doing it, I make sure that I also say, well, wait a minute, that's a waste of energy. Because why would I spend time and energy worrying on something that hasn't happened? It's like sitting here and being afraid of an earthquake. I've lived here in this region 30 years or more, and more, I guess, and there's been one earthquake. And that's kind of a silly example, but I would say if you're anxious or afraid of things that aren't real, that's a cognitive distortion. And you can Google the term cognitive distortion and get all kinds of information and book recommendations on how to address those. And Amy, if I'm not mistaken, you said something about journaling has been just kind of ranting, right? That's kind of like a brain dump. You can certainly, ranting in a journal is very, very effective. Because it's better out than in, number one, and it's better on paper than in somebody's face or in your fury. But it's not the only reason to journal, to vent like that. You can journal to organize your thoughts. A way to vent about stuff, especially, yes, others wouldn't understand. Yes, all of that is very important. But keep in mind, journaling is also a way just to organize what's in your brain. Sometimes with those brain dumps, if you just write and write and write and write, escaping in your thoughts is the answer to a question that you've had in your head forever. Escaping out of that are themes that you might not have wanted to have spoken out loud, but they came out as your thoughts flowed. You can do journaling that is specifically designed to get you to expand an idea. You know, you could do I believe because statements, or the thing that I'm confused about statements, as a way of kind of getting you to expand, and that curiosity that I'm constantly talking about. Just expand what you know, what you're aware of thinking. What does personal relationship mean? So to me, a personal relationship is any relationship that I personally have. So my personal relationship with each one of my children is kind of separate than the relationship that I say I have with my kids. My personal relationship is more of a one-on-one relationship, I think. It's the one that represents my contribution in the relationship. I think that's what I would say. Like signs of liking someone more than a friend, or like romantic relationship. No, I don't think personal relationships have necessarily anything to do with romance. It's just your contribution. It's my personal relationship. It's just the unique interaction that you personally have with another person, whether it's romantic or otherwise. It can be a personal, professional relationship, right? My personal relationship with my boss is very professional. What is a romantic relationship, or signs that someone likes someone else? So, what's a close work relationship, like a close, intimate relationship? So, Lily, I think that this question is, if you just think about this, like I guess I'm curious about why you're asking the question, because you've had, at least my understanding is, you've shared lots of comments about people that you care about and people that like you, and I think you seem to have a good understanding of that. So what's your actual, I'm not sure I really understand your actual question. How do you know if somebody cares about you? They want to spend time with you, they say nice things to you, they treat you well, you're excited to see them, you share a lot in common, you can easily maintain conversations. Hello, plant bellies. Like a partner. Well, I mean, all of that, like a life partner. And how do you know if somebody is a life partner? I mean, I think maybe you're wording it in the way that you know how, and I'm just not connecting. It doesn't have to be your fault. I'm just thinking, I'm just not really 100% sure what you're asking. How do you know if somebody is life partner material? Is like trying to figure out if their coworker. Yeah, is it that, Allie? I mean, Lily? I, I'm just, I want to be able to talk about that, but I don't. One question seems super elementary, and I want to make it doesn't make sense that you would be asking that. How to know if someone likes you more than a friend? Well, here again, I think most of the time they tell you, or they make an effort to be romantic with you. Um, and in the absence of either one of those, I would say they were just a friend. If they don't tell you how much they like you and they're not making an effort to be romantic, then I would assume that they are just friends. Does nonverbal cues like blushing give away that they like you? Um, Maybe. I don't think that it's appropriate to make assumptions about nonverbal cues, um, especially when we're talking about romance. I think I think assumptions in general are very poor communication attempts, and often they fail. And so blushing implies embarrassment, um, um, discomfort, right? Um, Shame sometimes. Um, and sometimes somebody's embarrassed that you caught them looking at you, or so people can blush for all kinds of reasons. They're uncomfortable, they're feeling awkward. So that's not necessarily a sign that they like you more than a friend. And copying your speed can also just be a communication pattern. It doesn't necessarily mean that they like you. As a woman walks another sign, I don't know what that means. A woman walks another sign. Walking shoulder to shoulder. I think women walk shoulder to shoulder often, especially in a city. And the closer you are to a female friend, the more you might do that. I mean, I've been known to walk kind of arm in arm with a friend, but I wasn't romantically involved with her. Um, that just really depends on the friendship. like a man who like a man who likes a woman would walk shoulder to shoulder. Well, here again, it just depends. None of those, they're all potentially characteristics of somebody who's wanting to get closer. And the desire to get closer could imply that they want more from the relationship. It could also mean just that they feel super comfortable being physically close. Don't make any assumptions. Ask, hey, why are you walking that close? Just curious. Hey, are you liking me more than just friends? Because that's what that means to me when we walk like that. Don't make assumptions, because I think it could be totally innocuous, very platonic, or it could be something else, but you have to ask or wait until they say something. Jax, I don't have a single specialty. I would say that at least half my practice is couples counseling. And I do a lot of anxiety, a lot of personal growth and development. I do a fair amount of coaching. I work with some teenagers, mostly like anxiety. So I would say it's probably number 1 is couples counseling, number 2 is anxiety, number 3 is personal growth and development, self-awareness. You know what was pretty cool? This was pretty cool, and I've been wondering if I should make some content. But I was on a session, virtual session, with a client on Monday morning, and he said to me, and this kid, by the way, is amazing, and he's been amazing. Anyway, he said, there's a couple of hard things that we've had to talk about. Claudia, you're going to Hawaii. Congratulations. Let me finish this story, because we've had a couple of hard things come up. Just, I guess he's kind of gotten to the point where he's ready to unpack them. And I only really spend a tiny little bit of time in our sessions on them because they're that challenging for him to process. But what was super cool is he goes, do you know who Elise Myers is on TikTok? And I said, yes, she's got like 3 million followers. I know who she is. And he said that he was watching one of her videos, and he said, and I just started bawling. And we were able to spend like the entire session unpacking the emotions that had risen from that video. And I've been wanting to share that story and tag Elise Myers. I didn't want it to look like I was trying to piggyback or clickbait or whatever that's called. But I did think it was so incredibly cool. And as content creators, or really as people, we just never know when we're going to, or where or how we might have an impact on someone else. And I just think it would be cool. I love hearing that kind of stuff, and I think it would be cool to share that with her. Not that she would necessarily see my TikTok, but anyway, I think it's a cool story, and I just think it's very cool that this very benign video that she put up was able to open the door for something in him that allowed him to begin to heal a very old pain. Unpack why old people make me sad. You know why it might be? And make me sad is an interesting, what you're asking me is, tell me why I feel sad when I'm around or when I see old people. And if that's what you're asking, then what it might be is that you have an assumption that their time is limited. And maybe there's something sad about that for you in limited time. Especially if they're old people that you don't know necessarily. Just it's a representation of being out of time, and maybe there's a trigger there someplace. Olden times make you sad too. Nick, maybe you are reincarnated from that era, and you're just like, you've got this residual emotion from something that happened there. It's knowing that their time is limited. Yeah. You miss your grandparents 12 years and yeah. There was somebody, I can't think of what it is now, but somebody made reference to old people. And I said, and what is old to you? And she's like, anybody older than 60. And I'm like, officially old. All of our time. Your most favorite elderly lady died in your arms 2 years ago. I like that you can say that it was nice that you were with her. And Janetta, you're absolutely right. All of our time is limited and none of us know. And that's such a cliche. I'm trying to think of God, I have too many, like literally too many ideas in my head. But I really have given this so much thought, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. If anything, I have a lot of ideas and I do nothing with a lot of them. But I really and truly believe that if we just collected cliches, we probably could develop or build a manual for life, for living life. Just with a collection of cliches. Those things that have withstood the test of time, that remain true generation after generation after generation. And it just, the more I think about it, the more that it just boggles my mind that it's like, feels to me like it's been there all this time. I feel like I'm a little bit, I'm going to sound crazy. I feel a little bit like it's a video game, and you've been looking and looking and looking for the answers, but they're literally just right there. That if you just go back and you start collecting all these cliches, that they will teach you what you need to do to live a happy life. I'm really interested in that experiment. You want a divorce, but you stay for your kids. Well, hi, Ars, and I'm sorry about that. You might want to ask your kids. One of my daughters told me once that she would lie in bed at night and pray that her parents would get divorced, because she could hear us fighting and she hated that, and it was disruptive to her. But I know the truth is that for some people that means their standard of living changes dramatically. It means mom has to work 2-3 jobs and maybe isn't there very much. And so I know that the temptation is to stay for the kids, but the truth is the research very clearly demonstrates that as long as as long as children have one healthy parent, they're longitudinally over time, they're in just as good of shape as if they had 2 parents in the home. So it's really less about how many people are there and more about what is the environment of the home that they're growing up in. And so if a partner is an alcoholic or abusive in any way, um, staying for the kids isn't doesn't make much sense unless what you're staying for is the financial um, positioning that it gives you. And I certainly understand what that feels like. He's a great dad. Well, that's good, Ars. I mean, it makes it easier to know that he's a great dad. And we are too stubborn to listen to someone else's advice. So even if we did have a manual, how many would take advantage of? Well, that's just it, Nick. Um, Probably few, but I do think it's interesting. It's just so interesting. I spend a fair amount of time looking at quotes, and it's a long story, but it's kind of like looking at maps. It's just one of the things I do for fun. And for quotes, it's often motivational. Um, so these things that are cliches, like it just, even starting like with Aristotle and Epicurus and um, all of these really ancient philosophers, it was like some of the things they said are still so true. It's mind boggling. It's pretty darn cool, to be honest with you. It's pretty darn cool to know that Caitlin, you said something the other day on Monday night that maybe this is why I've been really. Oh, Janetta, I will talk about that because I know that you asked a question about that too. Um, but I want to say, Caitlin, that your comment on Monday about me teaching you to accept, if I remember correctly, it was just really being able to love all parts of yourself. Um, um, and I think that the I love that you told me that because it inspires me to just keep rambling because that's what I do on here sometimes. I just ramble. And in that rambling, if there's something that I'm working through or something that I've helped somebody else work through and it can indirectly help somebody, yes, brokenness, to really accept that brokenness. Um, Thank you, Nick. And you're right, loving yourself is hard. So, Janetta, I was going to say, in terms of what benefit, like what do you hope to accomplish from journaling? I think that was your other question. And I answered, Amy kind of had this similar question, and I answered it earlier tonight, but I think there's two benefits from journaling. One is to get the shit out of here and just out so that it's not sitting inside of you and festering. The other is sometimes it helps you organize. So I'm going to make it three. So one is it gets the crap that's in here out instead of sitting in there festering. The second thing is that it can help you organize your thoughts. The third thing, and this is also where brain dumping just comes into play. When you're just free writing, just going at it, rambling, it's a little bit like what I just said, right? That when I'm rambling, sometimes I'm actually figuring something out that I'm struggling with, or I'm hearing myself, which sometimes that's very powerful, right? Because you can think something necessarily, but when you're actually articulating it and you can hear yourself, there's clarity in that. What sort of therapist am I? So I'm a mental health therapist, the best kind. Thank you, Nick. And I do a lot of couples counseling, anxiety, personal growth, coaching. Any advice for grief? Hi, Food Nerd. I have lots of advice for grief. Grief was my master's thesis work, and I have a lot of personal experience. My best advice for grief is to let it move through you. Literally, allow yourself to be a conduit for the feelings, and don't try to resist them or keep them at bay, because it's just like building a dam and you will flood. It's really important not to create any expectations around your grief. Just understand that it's going to be there. It's going to take whatever shape is representative of the relationship that you had with that person, your personal beliefs about death and the afterlife and all of that kind of stuff, the environment that you're in. And it's grief has a mind of its own, and if we try to resist it, it fights back. And so it helps if there's some meaning making that you can generate as a result of your grief. And David Kessler is the author that you want to look up if you want to know more about meaning making in grief. That might be very helpful for you. So angry at the man who killed your sister didn't go. Your father didn't go to her funeral. You can't forgive him. How do you forgive someone? Hello, Big Mick. And you're welcome. You know, let's talk about funerals for a minute. Because one of the things that happens with grief, when I said for a minute ago that part of your grief experience is wrapped up in the way that you feel about death, the way that you feel about the afterlife. Harlan chose not to have a funeral. And there were people that simply did not know how to function with that decision. I had people show up at the house saying, listen, you can just have a celebration of life service. I'll let you use my house. I'll let you. And I'm like, Harlan was very specific about how he wanted to be remembered, and he did not want to be the center of anybody's attention, especially not 40 or 50 people or more. And I have a very strong belief that we need to be respectful of how they saw their life. And I understand, I worked in hospice for a year. I've been grieving somebody, since Rocky died 35 years ago. I understand that funerals are for the living. They're a way of generating closure for some people. But not everybody feels that way. It was years after Rocky's death before I could go to a funeral again. And it didn't mean that I had any more or less respect for the person who passed away. It just meant that I couldn't go to the funeral. And the person who was dead didn't know if I was there or not, or if they did, then they were in a place where they could see my heart and know that I was struggling. And Janetta, yes. Rocky was my first husband. He died when I was 20, just before I turned 25. He was 23. And then I remarried. And so my son is a product of my marriage with Rocky. And then I remarried a serial cheater, but I was with him for 16 years and I had 3 more girls. And then I divorced him and met Harlan, and we were together 10 years before he got diagnosed with cancer and passed away. So I talk a lot about them. And if you go through my content, somewhere there's a video of Harlan. And I talk, especially early on in my content, about my first husband and that story. And thank you. And so you can get to know a little bit more about me. So anyway, in terms of funerals, right, there's that variability that is very unique to people, and some people just can't do funerals. But it's, I think I would try, and I have no idea what your dad's story was, but try to understand that just not everybody does funerals. In terms of forgiving, there are hundreds of books about forgiveness, and there are psychologists who study forgiveness in under a couple of different theoretical models. I tend to try to go along with the idea that forgiveness means that I'm not going to let that energy direct my behavior any longer. That it's the event that was painful is over and done with. And when I surrender to the fact that it happened, when I kind of go into this acceptance place that happened, I can't change it. And I'm not going to let the negative energy of that rob today of joy. I think that's a type of forgiveness. But I want to make it really clear that forgiveness is not a one and done thing. I've never ever known it to be a one and done thing. Forgiveness is something that you might have to do 20 times a day, and then 10 times, and then 5 times, and then eventually it's once a week. But forgiveness is an activity that says, I am not going to allow the pain of that event steal my joy in this moment. You don't think forgiveness has to be had to heal. Yeah, and like I said, there are as many definitions of forgiveness as there are psychologists who are studying it. So please don't take mine or the way that I perceive forgiveness to be some ironclad methodology, because I don't believe that one exists. There's too many different kinds of pains, too many different kinds of people, and too many different kinds of theological kind of basis or premises from which that word originates. And, that cliche, remember I talked about? Cliche, forgiveness isn't about them, it's about you. It's not about what they did to you, it's about what you're doing with that thing. That's where I kind of start there, right? This idea that forgiveness really has nothing to do with releasing the other person of responsibility, of accountability. Forgiveness isn't for them. forgiveness is for you, which is why I'm saying that it's really about nothing about that what has happened can change. Nothing. And so forgiveness is an acceptance of what was, and then a decision not to let that rob the joy of today, in my opinion. That's what my, and I promise you, there are moments when I am doing that daily on for old stuff, because it's, I notice that old stuff filters in and starts robbing joy in my moment, and I'm like, girl, do not give that incident any more power. It's over. It doesn't need any more power. Then okay, snicker eye. Let's see. He just disowned you and said you weren't his kid when she died. Then ghosted you for 2 years until he got sick. Everyone said you should forgive him. But I'm supposed to forgive him because he's dying? No. So I don't know that this is a cliche, but so those of you who know me know that I'm not a religious person, but I am deeply spiritual, and I do believe that the Bible has a lot of these cliche things that we can learn from. And one of the things that I think is very powerful are the words, the supposed words of Jesus on the cross when he says, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And I think there's a lot, so I'm coming at this from a mental health perspective too. That there are so many really broken people, that they are incapable of understanding the context and the consequence of their behavior. Okay? I really do believe that. I see it in my practice, but I see it more probably just in my personal world. And so for people like your father, I think to myself, that's the behavior of someone who's so self-absorbed that he's only in his own space, that he's not able to step outside of his own space. And so essentially, forgiveness is about saying, I accept that that's where you were. And I'll say the words, I forgive you for not being who I needed you to be. I understand and see that you were a broken person when I needed you to be a whole parent. And I know now that you couldn't be. So that's kind of that forgiving them for not knowing, right? Or for not doing what you needed. I sit back often and think about my ex-husband, and I just know that a long time ago, I forgave him for not being the man I had wanted him to be. The funny thing is he never probably was. He really never probably was. I created this image that I expected him to fulfill. So maybe a lot of the work was forgiving myself for being in this space where I did that, and then just kind of manifested this hope and dream that wasn't even ever possible. But that's kind of a long story. Yeah, so see, Now he ghosted you again since September. Tried to send pics of the kids, no response. That is a broken man. That's a broken man. And when you can see someone for their brokenness, then forgiveness becomes really easy, because it's like, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Do you hold a grudge with a 2-year-old who does this to you? No, because they don't know that they're doing something wrong. And I understand that the person we're talking about is not 2. But I think emotionally, they're probably incredibly immature. Emotionally, they're probably stunted in adolescence. You can almost always tell somebody who is stunted in adolescence, because the whole point, and it's interesting, if you study childhood development, there are kind of phases of adolescent development that seem to be very specifically focused on certain parts of brain development and emotional awareness. And so when somebody sits in my office and all they can do is talk about their social position in the world, I think, man, you're stuck in middle school. You're an emotionally stunted 13-year-old. When I see somebody that's so concerned, just so locked into what I need, and most narcissists fall into this category, what's important to me, it's often because they're stunted emotionally in that 17, 18-year-old space, where really nobody in the world exists except the people I want in my world and me. So it's so interesting, really. I know. See, here I went off on this big tangent. So Snicker Eye, I would say that it's easier to sit back and just kind of say, when someone's that broken, they know not what they do, right? My ex-husband, I remember saying to him, when I found out about his relationship with my sister and how he was going to pursue that relationship, because I was done. I was just done. And so then he decides he's going to pursue that relationship. And I'm like, you are a fool. If you think your daughters for 1 second are going to tolerate you in a romantic relationship with their aunt, they'll be fine. They love her. And I'm like, you're just foolish. And he literally couldn't see it. He couldn't see it. And they've been in and out of therapy for years, and until finally they just said, that's it. You're not listening. You don't get it. You're not considering us. And he just was so narcissistic, which essentially so emotionally stunted, that he didn't even have the capacity for the awareness of the consequence of that behavior. So, and what do they think? They have no relationship with him, or her for that matter. I don't think they've spoken to her since mom died, so 16 years ago. And one of my daughters casually talks to him maybe once or twice a year. The other two haven't talked to him in years. At this point, it's been a long, long time. A lot of life has but nothing changes the fact that she's my sister. And that's the part that's so funny, is I guess at some point, I think they both thought that it would just blow over, but it doesn't blow over if the genes don't change, like the facts don't change. So are narcissistic people stuck in a grieving stage that then just repeat a cycle from abandonment at young ages? That's a really good question. Probably not across the board, but I think that's definitely a condition that can initiate or kind of foster the development of narcissism. But I would say probably not across the board. Anyway, good question though. Thank you again for being here. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you guys. I'll be back Monday night. So see you then. Bye.